Welcome, everybody. I'm Sylvia from Climate Cake, and I'm happy to welcome you all today to the Innovation Practice Group on water management. Today, we're going to have some deep dive information about water drought, about water management, and a series of other key topics about this with this Innovation Practice Group. But before starting, I would like to give you some technical consideration and technical instruction of how to deal with today's presentation. So the first thing is it will be really lovely if you can keep your microphone muted when you're not speaking, but also to unmute your microphone if you would like to contribute mainly during the Q&A session. It's also really nice to see that someone has already started to turn on the camera so we can see each other's face and we can kind of present and speak in front of someone. And the last thing is that today we're going to use a few engagement tools. So we would like to invite you all to raise your hands in Zoom when it's going to come to the Q&A session, or use other reaction if you want to react to something that has been said, and also to use the chat for all your questions along the way. The agenda of today has changed a little bit, unfortunately. One of the speakers that was supposed to join us today is she's sick, so she won't be able to be here with us. But we do have Natalie that she's going to guide us through a very insightful presentation, and we're going to still have the opportunity to interact all together in the second part of today's session. We're going to start with a quick introduction about what innovation practice groups are. We're going to move in Miro for a quick check-in, and then we're going to introduce a bit more in depth the water management innovation practice group. After Natalie's presentation, we're going to have time for the Q&A, and then we're going to move into some breakout rooms to do some interactive exercise about what Natalie is going to present us, to then share this in plenary at the very end of the session and close the day with a couple of information that we would like to share with all of you. So what are Innovation Practice Group? Innovation Practice Group are part of a program called Pathway to Resilience. I know that today we do have also external participants and not only regions that are already involved in the Pathway to Resilience program. And the idea of Innovation Practice Group is that we would like to create those learning and knowledge sharing groups guided by what are your and regional challenges and needs, and try to make kind of those groups where we can interact to each other, we can define new idea, new plan and solution. Innovation Practice Group are guided by those 4 principles that you can see in the screen. The first one is to showcase best practice and highlight some successful existing solution that you probably have been implementing at your regional level. The second one is to develop plans and ideas, so to co-create all together and to have like those new innovative practice that we can build together. The third point is to share expertise, so exchange knowledge and experience on the enabling condition and systems. And the last part is to have a bit of a more broadened perspective, so to gain like from each other and to gain from the exchange at European level. The key objectives are 3. The first is to connect the regions with sources of knowledge and expertise. The second is to connect the regions among themselves, so to create this community of innovative adaptation practitioners across Europe. And the third one is to provide additional knowledge and exchange opportunities to all of you. The Innovation Practice Group timeline is going to be a long one, and that this has already started like a few months ago, when in October 2024 we had the kickoff meeting for the program Pathway to Resilience with all our regions, where with all the regions we have tried to identify what are the challenges and the needs related to all the different Innovation Practice Group topic that our regions and communities are facing at the moment. And it's starting from those challenges and needs that we have decided to go into deeper analysis of a specific topic. And today we're starting with this week 1 that starts 2 days ago and gonna end on Friday. And during week 1, we're gonna have all different sessions as this one that we're participating today on different key enabling conditions and key communities system. We're going to have also 2 other weeks before the end of the year, during which we're going to meet all together to discuss further the water management topic. The week 2 is going to be from June 2nd, and the week 3 is going to start on the 22nd of September. The idea is not to close the innovation practice group by the end of the year. As we mentioned, the idea is to bring all of you, all the expertise together to have this practitioner group. And we would like to then bridge like what we're going to do during this first year with what we're going to have the opportunity to do together with a new cohort of region coming to Pathway to Resilience at the beginning of next year. So this is in a nutshell what and why we're all here today. And this slide that I'm showing up now is how we're going to interact with each other and how we're going to collect all the learning that we're going to share through the innovation practice group. You will have access to a Miro board. For those that are not familiar with it, so we're going to guide you through the Miro board, so you will have a bit more of understanding of how to use it. And the Miro board is going to be available for you along the entire year and also along like the next session of the innovation practice group. The Miro board is going to be split in 3 main parts. The initial part is where you can find the innovation practice group calendars. You will see like you will have the possibility to register to all the innovation practice group of week 1. You will have the opportunity to see already when the different topics are going to be delivered during week 2, and we're going to update this through the process. The central part is referring to the content of the different session. So you will find the PowerPoint that has been presented by the speaker. You will find a place to interact to each other. You will find some checking question and all of this. And then the last part, which is probably the most important part, is what we call wall of resources. Here we'll find different tools, different templates, reports, different case study, and Pathway to Resilient links as well. The idea is to use this space in a co-creative way. So we're also inviting you to share in this wall of resources everything that you think could be relevant for the participant of today's session and of future session. Having said that, after this quick presentation, I would like to move into a quick icebreaker. So I'm going to invite you all to join me on the Miro board that I've just presented. And I think that the link is going to pop up in the chat for you. And once you're going to be in Miro, I'm going to guide you through a check-in exercise. I'm just waiting to have the link in the chat and also post it. Here you go. So please open the link. And I will ask you to join me on the check-in part. And for those that are not familiar, you see that we have like 60 people that are joining here, 70. I'm gonna bring you all to me. So you will ideally be redirected directly where I am. And then I'm gonna do this quickly again for those that are joining us now. Okay, I see that people are here around, nice. So what we're asking you to do is that we would like to hear a bit more about you, so to see who is in the room with us today. So I would like to invite you to grab a post-it according to your profile. So if you're working more on policy and advocacy, if you're working on the social aspect, technical, research, finance, or other aspect, and I would like to ask you to please grab one of those post-it, the small one that are here, do a double click on the post-it, type your name, and type the name of your organization. And then to move the post-it close to the location where you are based. So we're going to see like our European like card here populated with all of us. So we can see someone from Spain, someone from the Netherlands, someone from Denmark. We have someone from the Eastern Europe as well. And if you're joining from outside Europe, please feel free to go outside of the box here. So do not limit yourself. Add your post-it somewhere else. I'm gonna wait a few more minutes so you can start to understand how Miro works, get familiarized with it, because we're gonna use it also later today. So it's good as a starting point to start to move post-it around. We can also see that we have someone that is working a bit more on technical aspect, someone that is speaking now a post-it about policy and advisory. Robin, thanks for joining. People are also trying to explore how to put post-its like bigger and smaller. You can always like grab the post-it and move the post-it side in this way. And let's try to delete this connection. Okay. And then when you have typed your name and your organization, just grab the post-it and move it around the board, locating your post-it close to your location. Good. Thank you. I see that people are still kind of enjoying a little bit the process, but I'm also conscious of time. So I think that as next step, we can move into a bit more of details of what today innovation practice groups is gonna look like. And for that, I'm happy to pass the floor to Karianne from Deltaris that is gonna guide us through today's session.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Guess it works. Yeah, so welcome. And today, this first IPG on water management, we together as the P2R team and also the invited speakers were thinking about the topic to start with. And we actually came up with the topic to look at both water scarcity and flooding. But as Sylvia already mentioned, the presenter on the water scarcity is unfortunately not joining. So the session will be more about flooding. But I think we can also take these other topics into the next IPGs, as was mentioned. So also please think about if you're really interested in the topic to also later on, uh, yeah, uh, uh, raise your interest on this so that we can take that up in the next meeting. Maybe the next slide, Sylvia. So I think what we also wrote earlier. So looking in water management conditions, too much and too little. I also know Natalie will also touch upon both a bit more also from the Dutch context, and that we indeed see this as a way to explore the example in the Netherlands, and then also hearing from you in the breakout session afterwards from your own perspective. So yeah, you'll be hearing from the lead expert on this. Natalie is a specialist advisor on flood risk management at Deltaris. We have the possibility to exchange on knowledge and to also then interact. So I think it's actually maybe to do the next slide, Sylvia. I think we go. Oh, there's a yeah. So I think Natalie, the floor is yours. So maybe you can also introduce yourself a little bit more. And also, please note that there will be time for a Q&A after her presentation. And indeed, raise your hand or write your question in the chat, and we will facilitate that further. So, Natalie, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Karianne. Let's see, I'm going to share my screen. Wait, then I'll first go back to the presentation, otherwise. You see my presentation or are you seeing something else?
We see your presentation. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'll put it in presentation mode. Okay. Yes, like Karianne already said, my name is Nathalie. I've been working at Altaris for 26 years now. The last 15 years, I've been working in the major river areas. My key background is on flood risk management, but over the past few years, this has developed to much more integrated flood risk management, and we are calling it also integrated river management. So that's what I will be talking about over the next, let's say, 20 minutes. And I'm going to share some examples with you of how we use adaptive planning while developing policies for our river areas, the major rivers in the Netherlands. So before I start, a little bit more about the Integrated River Management Program. So it's flood risk management, but then slightly more integrated. So we're looking at 5 river functions: freshwater supply, inland navigation, spatial planning, nature, and flood risk. And we're looking at the drivers: climate change, spatial, in the Netherlands, it is already pretty crowded, but we have to build more houses, so the pressure on space will increase, and also on morphological changes in the major rivers. So together with stakeholders, we're looking at potential solutions and how these could fit over time to come to a strategy that will help not only flood risk, but will be beneficial for the other river functions. And within 2 years' time, the Dutch ministry would like to take 4 decisions. So the first policy decision will be on how to deal with the riverbed erosion. So it will be how can we stop the erosion of the main channel? So it has to do with sediment management. The second and the third policy rule will be on the discharge distribution. I will tell you a little bit more when I go to the next few slides. So we're looking at high flows and low flows, and how can we distribute the water over the different tributaries of the River Rhine in the Netherlands. And they would like to take a decision on how we are going to increase the discharge capacity of the major rivers in the Netherlands. Are we just going to rise the embankments, or do we also want to make room for the river, or do we have different alternative options? So before I continue, a little bit more about the Rhine and the Meuse in the Netherlands. They are the major rivers that supply us with fresh water. The Rhine comes from Germany, enters the Netherlands at Lobit, and then at the first bifurcation point, it splits into the Waal, which flows west, and at Pannerden's Canal, that goes north. And then at second bifurcation, it splits into the Nederrijn-Lek, which goes west, and the River IJssel, which goes north into a freshwater lake, IJsselmeer. The dots represent the locations where we can steer how the water flows. And for the main rivers, and what I'm going to talk about, the weir near Driel is very important. This is a picture of that weir. It helps distributing the water at low flows. And for high flow conditions, we have near both bifurcation points made weirs in the floodplains. This is an aerial view when the weir near the Pannerdense Kop. So that's the first bifurcation point when it was made, and this is what it looks like on the ground. So we can put in extra blocks, or we can take out some of the blocks, depending on how much water we would like to flow in a northerly direction. And when we look at the discharge distribution, basically especially for low flow, there are 2 important issues to keep in mind. And that is that, on the one hand, we would like to have sufficient water flowing through the River Waal in a westerly direction. And that it not only has to do because of salt intrusion in the western part of the Netherlands, but also because the Waal River is a very important shipping transport line. But we also would like to have enough water at low flow conditions flowing in a northerly direction to the IJsselmeer, because we consider that as our national rain barrel. If water levels are too low at the IJsselmeer, then freshwater supply, especially to the northern part of the Netherlands, is at risk. So just to give a little bit of background information on the situation in the Netherlands. And then about policy development. Not only, I think, when we look at flood risk, but in general, policy development often has been reactive. So a disaster or a near disaster happened, and then we responded. And when we look at flood risk, then one of the disasters that had a big impact on flood risk policies in the Netherlands was the coastal flooding in 1953. The map on the right shows in the black dots all the dike breach locations, and the pink colored areas, they were flooded. So many people lost their lives, a lot of cattle died, many houses were damaged. So this was such a big event that after this flood, we started with the first Delta plan, and we decided to close off many of the estuaries in the southwestern part of the country. So on the image on the right, you can see all the dams and the storm surge barriers that we constructed, and the pictures show the storm. This one is the Maaslandkering near Rotterdam. It's located here, and this is the storm surge barrier in the Oosterschelde, so that's located over here. And this reactive approach, we also see that when we look at the embankments that we made in the Netherlands. From a historical perspective, over the last 1,000 years, the Netherlands have put a lot of effort in protecting the country with embankments. And if you would cut through these embankments, as was done in this one, you would see several levels of the older embankments. So after every disaster or after every near disaster, we decided to raise the embankments or widen the embankments to improve the protection. And when you look at several locations along the major rivers in the Netherlands, you will find these situations where these houses, they used to be on top of the embankment, but as we kept on raising it, time after time, they first needed a few stairs to come up to the new embankment, and then we increased the height further, more on the river side. So these stepwise approaches you can see in many locations along the major rivers in the Netherlands. And after the near floods of 1993 and 1995, I call them near floods because it was a flood. We had very high discharges in the major rivers, but at the locations where we did have embankments, they could just resist this very high water levels. So 2 pictures that were taken during these floods, especially during the flood of 1995, hundreds of thousands of people were evacuated because, as you can see in these pictures, the situation became quite critical, but we were very fortunate that no dikes actually failed. So we were happy, but it was still a sort of wake-up call again that we would have to take action again. And in this case, we decided not to raise the embankments, but instead to give room to the river so that the water levels wouldn't keep on rising. So on the right, you can see a picture of one of the most iconic Room for the River projects in the Netherlands. And to give you an idea of what it looked like previously, so this is the location of the embankment. The older embankment on the right side used to be here. So this was a very narrow section of the river. This is the city of Nijmegen. You have the main channel and you would have a very narrow floodplain. So this was an extreme bottleneck, high water levels, not much space. So now the embankment has been relocated over here, and a huge side channel has been excavated to increase the discharge capacity and to lower the water levels by about 0.5 meter. So we did take action again, And we did change the type of policy that we applied, so no raising of embankments, but giving room to the river, but it still remained reactive. Something almost went wrong and we would take action. And it took until 2010 before we started with the Delta program in the Netherlands. And then we said, we want to look ahead. We're not going to wait for an extreme event to happen, but we are going to look ahead until 2050 and 2100. And we are going to look at what climate change could mean for the Netherlands and for the rivers in the Netherlands, and what socioeconomic changes could mean for the country. And then we're going to develop new policies looking ahead. And the aim of the Delta program was to make sure that we have sufficient supply of fresh water. So one of the main questions is how can we, when looking at the rivers, one of the main questions is how can we optimize the distribution of fresh water over the Netherlands? We also want to look into the flood protection standards that we had. So in 2017, as a result of this Delta program, we developed new protection standards. In most parts of the Netherlands, they are much higher than they used to be. So we have it's more in line with also the economic developments that have taken place over the past decades. And thirdly, we wanted to look into climate-proof and water-robust spatial planning. So these were the 3 national goals, and they were also taken into account in the more regional programs. And I was involved in the program that looked at the major rivers, so the blue areas. So the main message from the Delta program was we don't want to be reactive anymore. We want to be proactive. We want to look ahead and make an adaptive plan. So if we look at the major rivers, what are the challenges that we are facing? Well, on the one hand, we think that climate change will result in higher and more frequent floodings. But we also think that climate change will result in longer and more frequent periods of low flow. So the average discharge of the Rhine and Meuse rivers in the Netherlands will not change much, but the extremes will become more extreme, both on the low flow side and on the high flow side. But that's not the only challenge that we are facing. We also have to deal with riverbed erosion, and that mainly was our own fault, because what we did it started in 1815. We started with river normalizations, and river normalization works, they mean that we wanted to straighten the rivers and we wanted to narrow the main channel with groins so that the discharge of water, sand and ice would be improved. And discharge of water, of course, would be beneficial for floods. Discharge of transport of sand would be beneficial for inland navigation, because before we had many sandbars in the river, small islands that hampered inland navigation. So with this river normalization, that would be improved. And ice was very important because many of the dike breaches that have occurred in the Netherlands along the major rivers were the result of ice dams. So as the rivers sometimes were covered with ice. And then if the temperature started to rise, then there would also be melting in Germany. So relatively high river flows, the ice layer in the Netherlands would break up. We would have ice jams blocking the flow, and that caused dike breaches. So it is understandable that people wanted to take these measures, but they resulted in riverbed erosion. On the upper right, it is a picture of the Meuse River, where you can still see the previous meanders, and then how we cut off all these meanders to straighten the river. But if you straighten the river, you increase the slope of the river, so the transport capacity increases, and this resulted in severe erosion. And this picture shows you how the riverbed eroded in about 60 years' time of the Bovenrijn and Waal. And you can see that especially in the upper part, it has been 2 meters in about 60 years' time. So that is really severe erosion. And the negative impact of this erosion is that, especially during low flows, the water levels of the river, they go down as well, together with the riverbed. So that means that groundwater levels go down. So that has a negative impact on nature in the floodplains, but also in the protected areas. And it also has a negative impact on the foundation of houses near the major rivers in the Netherlands. And it also has an impact on the way that we can transport or discharge water to the IJsselmeer River, because the erosion on the Waal River was more severe than on the Pannerden's Canal. So the erosion in this section is much more than in this section. So that means that over time, more water started flowing towards the west and less water started flowing towards the north. So also for low flow conditions and drought risk, this has an impact. But also for the navigation, riverbed erosion has very severe impacts, because what we did in some parts of the rivers, we made non-erodable fixed layers to protect crossing infrastructures, so cables or pipelines, or sometimes also cities like near Nijmegen. But these non-erodable fixed layers, they don't erode, they remain at the same level. And if the surrounding riverbed, so the surrounding riverbed is degrading, then the water levels go down, but these fixed layers, they remain in place. So over time, they become a sort of speed bumps for shipping, for inland navigation. So both climate change and riverbed erosion are the major challenges in the rivers in the Netherlands at the moment. And then I have two examples of how we are dealing with these challenges. The first one is related to inland navigation. And this is an example of a location near Weert. There is a canal near Weert, and the inflow of the canal, if you want to go into this canal with your ship, you have to pass some locks. They are fixed. So if the riverbed is eroding, then basically the water depth in these locks, it decreases over time. And what is shown in this graph is how the water depth in this first lock, how it decreases under a critical discharge that occurs about 20 days per year. And this discharge is at the moment, it's about 1,020 cubic meters per second. This discharge is very important because we have international agreements with Germany that only 20 days per year, the water depth in the major corridors is less than 2.8 meters. So if at this given discharge, the water depth is less than 2.8 meters, that would mean that we don't apply anymore with this international agreement. So in the case of this place where you can go from the river into a canal, that would mean that at the moment, the water depth is still sufficient, almost 3 meters. We are here already, so it's slightly less. But by the year 2030, we will reach this critical level of 2.8 meters. And if we don't do anything about the riverbed erosion, things will get worse. And in 2050, the water depth will be less than 2.5 meters. And then the other lines indicate how this situation becomes even more problematic if we also take climate change into account, because then this discharge that will occur about 20 days per year will decrease, we think, to about 800 cubic meters per second in the year 2015. So then we have to look at this orange line, and then this would mean that by 2050, we don't have 2.5 meters water depth at this location, but less than 2 meters water depth. So basically, it means that before 2030, we have to take action. And given the time that is needed to implement these measures, we have to take action now already. And then if we look at potential measures, then on the short term, we consider these as no regret measures. We can dredge at shallow parts in the river where sediments cause problems. In this graph over here, it shows all the orange and red colors. They are locations where we don't apply with the international agreement. At this location and at this location, that is caused by sedimentation in the inner bands of the river. So we can dredge those locations to still comply with the international agreement. And this is one of the fixed layers that I was talking about. We are also going to modify this fixed layer to prevent problems in the near future. But then on the medium term, we think that we could make these longitudinal training walls that you see in the picture below. And the impact of this measure is that we narrow the channel, the main channel, during low flow conditions, because then we close off this side channel. So there's hardly any water flowing through this side channel, but everything is centered in this part. So by narrowing the main channel, the water levels will go up and the water depth will increase. And then at higher flows, water will also flow through this side channel, so that during high flow conditions, we will not have to do with these higher water levels. So it will both be beneficial for low flows for inland navigation, but also for high flows, because then the water levels will be lower. So that's the measure that we consider for the medium term. And then on the very long term, because of course climate change will not stop at 2050, it's expected to continue. We also have discussions about changing the fleet. Maybe we should start sailing with smaller ships. And some people even talk about weirs, construction of weirs in the Vaal River, but I think that's still a very long way to go, because of the enormous impacts that also would have on nature and other functions. So in a similar way, we were looking at flood risk, like when would there be a tipping point for flood risk? And basically, we have passed that tipping point already, because in 2017, we implemented these new protection standards. And if we look at the major embankments in the Netherlands and we assessed whether they meet these new protection standards, then we would come up with the map on the right. And in green, you can see all the embankments that apply with the protection standards. So that's along the coast mainly. But if we look in the major rivers, then we often see these yellow-orange colors or the purple colors. And the orange colors, they indicate that the embankments do not comply with the protection standards, but the difference is not too big. So we have to take measures, but maybe it's not that urgent. But all the purple lines, they indicate that the difference between the actual failure probability and the failure probability that we should comply with according to the protection standards, it's a big gap, a huge difference. So for instance, along the Vaal River, there are reaches that have a protection standards of 1/10,000 per year, and the actual failure probability is estimated at 100 per year. So a big gap. So we have to take action. And on the short term, we are thinking now mainly of dike reinforcement. And although we would like to also use room for the river measures and other nature-based solutions, this will be very difficult to meet the failure probability by using those measures. And that mainly is because the main failure mechanism now in the Netherlands, the most important failure mechanism is seepage. So it's not the height of the embankment, but it's the strength of the embankment. And if we lower the water levels, that does not help much with the stability and the strength of the embankments. So the idea is that we now first have to strengthen them, and then maybe if climate continues in the medium and the long term, we can also look for room for the river measures or other nature-based solutions. And of course, dike reinforcement would then also still remain an option. But what we do take into account for the short term, basically to prevent lock-ins situations for the very far future is that we have spatial reservations. So at several locations along the major rivers, we have reserved areas. So there's no, the cities are not allowed to build in these areas. They should remain green, so it can be nature or it can be arable land, but no cities or other important investments, because we think that we might need these areas in the far future if we want to make bypasses, green rivers, or if we want to relocate the embankments. So this is basically what we are doing when we look at flood risk. And well, when I started making these sheets, I thought, well, this looks very promising and like everything is going great in the Netherlands. So then I thought, are we really 100% successful? And then my answer would be no, we are not. And there are several reasons for this answer. And part of the reasons are my personal opinion, but I wanted to share them with you because I think they might be important lessons also for other countries. So first of all, why aren't we 100% successful? And that is because we are looking ahead, 2050, 2100, but we still look at a sort of expected end situation. So we think like, what could climate change or social economic changes or bed erosion mean in the year 2100? And then we are going to develop pathways up to this sort of end situation. And just to give you an example of something that, in my opinion, went wrong by applying this way of thinking. It's a spatial reservation near the city of Zutphen along the IJssel River. So in blue, it's the main channel of the IJssel River. The green area shows the floodplain, so the unprotected area that is flooded every year. The city of Zutphen is located over here. There are a few houses built on the other side. The city wanted to expand on this side, but then several decades ago, it was decided that there should be a spatial reservation here, so that in the far future, in 2100, when the 1 in 1,000 year discharge would increase up to 18,000 cubic meters per second, this area might be needed for a bypass. So we made the spatial reservations so that after 2050, we could make a bypass. And we all thought about like, if we are able to deal with this discharge of 18,000 cubic meters, we would be fine. But then the city of Zutphen, they wanted to also start building houses and other developments use this area. So they came up with another plan. And they said, if we are going to make channels in this floodplain section, and if we're going to widen this railway bridge a little bit and the road bridge, then the discharge capacity would increase. We would be able to deal with this discharge of 18,000 cubic meters, and we no longer need a bypass over here. So then 10 years ago, it was decided to cancel this spatial reservation. It's no longer a spatial reservation. But now we are 10 years further. Some of the measures near this bridge have been carried out, but they were less effective than we thought they would be. So 18,000, I don't think it's possible yet to get this safely discharged past this city. And also, what are we going to do if climate changes further? Or what are we going to do if we want to change the discharge distribution? If we decide to send a little bit more water to the IJssel River? It's not possible because here it's a bottleneck and there's no space available anymore. Or what would we do if this discharge would increase further because, for instance, because of potential dike reinforcements in Germany? Because maybe I should explain that with very high flows in the Rhine River, in the present situation, there will also be flooding in Germany, and this will top off the discharge for the Netherlands. So even if there would be a 20,000 flood coming in our direction, the floods in Germany would result in lower peak discharges in the Netherlands. But of course, if you would rise the embankments in Germany, then the peak discharges in the Netherlands, the maximum discharge that we could expect, will also go up. And this has not been accounted for in this plan. So the spatial reservation was cancelled, but I think, personally, I think we should regret this, that we cancelled this spatial reservation. And it was done because we looked at the expected end situation in 2100 and we didn't look any further. A second reason why I think that we are not being 100% successful is that we focus on only a limited amount of uncertainty. Basically, we look at socioeconomic changes in the Netherlands and we look at climate change, but we haven't really, until now we are moving into the new policies that also look in, for instance, possible changes in water use in upstream countries, because if that changes, that might also affect the low flow conditions in the Netherlands, and the high flow conditions might be affected by embankments upstream or other measures that are taken upstream to decrease flood risk in upstream areas. And that could have a positive effect, but it could also have a negative effect on the Netherlands. And so far, we didn't really take that into account, but I think we should do that. So look at more uncertainties than just one or two, not only climate change, but other uncertainties as well. So this is something that we are improving. But then finally, and this is something that is really something that is going on right now, because we have these new protection standards, and now we are looking at different possible pathways to meet with these new protection standards before the year 2050, because that's what's written in our law, that we should meet the new protection standards before 2050. So we are developing these pathways, but we do that by economic optimization. And in my personal opinion, this is a bit of an academic exercise. So basically, we look at what is the cheapest way to raise the embankments in the future. Should we, for instance, raise them now a little bit, and then in 25 years' time, we raise them a little bit again, and then 25 years later, we do it again? Or should we say, well, no, we are going to raise them with a much bigger step now, and maybe we can stay away for 50 years. And then if you look at economic optimization, then of course, if you would increase the height now with a much bigger step, then the investments would be much higher now. And then if you look at the present value, then of course it's more expensive than taking smaller steps, and especially if climate change then would be less than we anticipate on. So the people who developed these pathways and did this economic optimization, they said it would be a little bit cheaper if we would base our designs on the low climate change scenario instead of the high climate change scenario, and then accept that we might have to come back and strengthen the embankments again, maybe in 25 years, 5 years time. But in my personal opinion, I think the focus in this approach is only on a limited number of drivers, in this example, only climate change. And other aspects are completely ignored, like the available capacity at the waterboards to raise these embankments. For instance, there's one waterboard in the major river area that has to strengthen, I think it's almost 600 kilometers of embankment. So for them, it's a huge task to finish this job in 33 years before the year 2050. If we would say it's the cheapest way to come back in 25 years, they will not be happy, because they simply do not have the capacity to reinforce the embankments every 25 years. But aspects like this are not accounted for in the approach that we apply now in the Netherlands. So I think if we develop these pathways, we should not only look at economic optimization, but we should also think of other aspects. Maybe you don't want to come back into these areas because it also gives a lot of disturbances to people living near these embankments. So maybe you don't want to come back every 20 or 25 years. Maybe that might also be a reason to say, okay, maybe it's economically not optimal, but for other reasons, we still take a different pathway with different steps. But that's my personal opinion. And then finally, the question, how much time do we need to implement all these measures? And a colleague of mine, he looked into several decisions that were taking over the last, let's say, 50 years and how much time it took to implement these measures. And then we go back to the first Delta program. Let's see, where is my mouse? The mouse? Here it is. So the picture on the left, when we decided that we wanted to close off many of these estuaries, it took 33, depending on when you consider it was completely finished, 33 up to 70 years to implement all the measures that was decided on in this plan. If we look into the room for the river measures that we took after the near floods in 1993 and 1995, it was 12 to 33 years. The Kierbesluit in Haringvliet, so one of this estuary was closed off with the dam, and then we decided that we wanted to have an opening in this dam so water could flow in and out in both ways, and that would be beneficial, especially for nature. After this decision was taken, it took 19 years before this opening was in place and activated. The Peilbesluit, so the decision on the lake level in the IJsselmeer, it took 26 years to adapt to that. And the implementation of the new protection standards will take at least 33 years. We hope we will be ready before 2050, but we are not sure if we will be able to finish before that year. So implementing measures takes a lot of time, several decades at least. And then if we look at how climate change might continue in the future, the uncertainty of the speed in which these changes are going to take place. This is an example of scenarios for sea level rise in the Netherlands. And then if you assume that we are here now and you look at the different scenarios, if we want to implement new delta works, then we would look ahead until 2100 maybe. So also, if you look at how much time it takes, then it might be a risk if you would only look at, for instance, the low climate change scenarios. And I wanted to end my presentation with a quote of Annemieke Nijhoff, our director at Deltares. And she once said, I first say it in Dutch and then I'll give the literal translation. She said, klimaatverandering gaat misschien sneller dan we denken en we zijn minder snel dan we hopen. So in English that would be climate might change faster than we think and we are slower than we are hoping for. So something to keep in mind when looking at adaptive pathways. So, summarizing, I think we are moving towards a more proactive approach in the Netherlands. We do not really draw adaptive pathways, but we do think that way by thinking of measures that we can take in the short term, the medium term, and the long term, and also by thinking of actions that we have to take now to make sure that we can still implement measures in the far future. So we think in an adaptive manner, but we still have quite some challenges to tackle, like how far ahead do we want to look into the future? What uncertainties do we want to take into account? And how are we going to deal with other aspects that might also influence these adaptation pathways, such as, for instance, the available capacity at the water boards. So that's what I wanted to tell you. I'll stop sharing my screen. I didn't look at the chat, so I have no idea if there are many questions, but Karianne will guide me through it, I suppose.
Yes. So, Natalie, thank you very much. I think it was a very interesting, full information about this approach and also your personal thinking and the elements you see, yeah, as a challenge. I think a lot of things also resonates actually to where the regions that are part of P2R, Pathways to Resilience, are going to move towards to develop these pathways and to really take up this thinking as well. The chat itself doesn't have any questions, but I still would like to give some space to any participants that could raise their hand if they have any clarification questions for Natalie. So maybe if you do, I'm also looking at Sylvia if you can see if anything happens.
Not for now. I noticed someone is also joining with the phone, so in case those that are joining with the phone have any question, just feel free to turn on the mic.
We can
To
give
say
them a minute to think, to raise their hand, and otherwise I have a question.
Or maybe you can start, Valeria. Do you have a...
I see a question in the chat from Oliver.
Okay, yeah, I can read it out loud, Olivier. Thank you, Natalie. What experience do you have with water-related hazards with water from above?
Pluvial flooding instead of fluvial flooding. Well, I'm first I'll go one step back. Like when we started with the implementation of the EU Floods Directive, at that time we realized that the embankments in the Netherlands were less strong than we always believed they were. So the main focus was on the fluvial flooding and the coastal flooding and these issues. Now we have made plans for those, and then we started looking into pluvial flooding as well, because if we, for instance, have these protection standards along the Waal River of 1,000 per year, then the fluvial flood risk will be very, very low. And then the pluvial flood risk becomes at least as important as the fluvial flood risk. And I think this moving towards pluvial flood risk was also increased and became more rapidly important after the floods in July 21, when we had these severe rainfall events in the south of the Netherlands and in parts of Belgium and Germany. So what we do now in the Netherlands is the approach that we follow there is not at the moment, not really developing adaptive pathways, but what we are doing there now is we are doing a lot of stress testing, because in the Netherlands, because usually I have to explain first, if a dike fails along the major rivers, then in the Netherlands the water level difference in the river and in the protected area at some locations is like 6 or 7 meters. So you can imagine if a dike fails, then you have a really big flood with high flow velocities and huge water depths. Pluvial flooding in the Netherlands, because our country is relatively flat, results in widespread flooding, but the water depths are like 10 or 20 centimeters. So that gives a different sense of urgency to deal with this. And also the protection standards, or the standards that the water system should apply with, are much lower. So like 1 in 10, 125, 100 per year. But what we have realized after this big event in July 21 is that we are not that good, or not that good. The July 21 event was not on our radar as a potential event that could hit the Netherlands. So we are now thinking like maybe we are missing out on more issues related to pluvial flooding. And maybe you are not that good at estimating what a 1 in 25 year event or 1 in 100 year event looks like. So now we're doing a lot of stress testing. And that basically means that we are saying like we are going to apply a huge rainfall event, and we are going to look at the response of the water system in the Netherlands at the areas that might be flooded then. And it doesn't mean that we are going to take measures in the water system itself, but we basically use this information to be prepared in case something would happen that is way above the design situations that we use for the water system. So I think when we look at pluvial flooding in the Netherlands, it's relatively new to put much effort and research on pluvial flooding. From history, over the last 1,000 years, we mainly focused on fluvial and coastal flooding, and that also you see that back in the approaches that we follow.
Thank you, Natalie. I also see a comment by Barry de Vries. He's also part of the P2R project, and he explains that locally there are experiences with pluvial flooding, for example, in the municipality of Bergendal, which is part of the Green Metropolitan Region. So there's also these local examples. Maybe we have time for one more clarification question, and I think then it's good to move to the breakout room discussions. So maybe just 1 minute. Maybe just to mention, if anybody's thinking about a question, but that Natalie's presentation will be available in the Miro board, as Sylvia mentioned. So that will be available today or tomorrow. So if you want to continue to look there, and also can reach out to us if you have any questions for Natalie afterwards. So I think we leave it to this. So thank you very much, Natalie. It's very informative. And we continue if there's anything. So I think in the program, we now continue to the breakout sessions. And Valeria will give a brief introduction, and then Sylvia will move us to one or the other breakout room. So, Valeria?
Yes, thank you, Karana. I don't think I need a slide. I think it's going to be very short. So what we're going to do now is we're going to divide you into 2 breakout rooms. I will be in one, Kariana will be in the other. And then we will guide you a little bit through a discussion that we can have together. We can have as a starting point what was just presented. So a bit maybe more in-depth reactions to what was presented, or how that compares to maybe how the Dutch approach compares to what's been doing, what you have been working on in your region in the past, and what you maybe are trying to achieve in the future. And then we also have some guiding questions based on basically what you filled in the surveys. So thank you for doing that when you signed up. So that's what we're going to do. We have 25 minutes for that, or has that become less, Sylvia? I think we can still do 25 minutes,
stay
right?
with 25 now.
Yeah. So the idea is we're going to talk about it for 25 minutes in the individual groups, and then we're coming back from a plenary and then sharing a bit what has been done in both rooms, so that you're aware of the whole conversation, and then we can think, okay, what else can we answer in the next session then? So if there's no question at this moment, I would just ask Sylvia to divide us in the 2 breakout rooms. And for the breakout rooms, we're going to use the Miro board again. So please open the Miro board. We are also going to share, I think, the Miro board in both groups, but we're going to work on that.
Great, thanks, Valeria. The Miro board is in the chat, and rooms are ready. So I'm gonna move you to the room in 3, 2, 1. Bye, everybody. Hi, welcome back, everybody. I hope you had like an insightful conversation. We're arriving to the end of today's session. Before closing, we would like to hear what has been like the discussion in the 2 different rooms. So I would like to give the floor to room number 1. I don't know who is going to share.
Yeah, I will share it. I think we also were a bit struggling with Miro. I don't know exactly what happened, but maybe that's something to check from our side. So yeah, there were, I think, primarily some aspects on what we missed in the presentation by Natalie, or challenges in the region. I think primarily also that there's much different land use questions going on. So also like the housing challenge not being considered, and if there's more housing, you would need more infrastructure. So given water management, how you deal with that. There was also a remark about how to deal if like certain areas are created or designated as spillover areas, how to then deal with landowners and how to activate them, or how then to discuss that. And then I think we ended up also a lot on supply and demand of water, both in terms of utilities, as was mentioned for a situation in Denmark, but then a lot also on agriculture versus, for instance, hydropower. So I think that was a bit more the challenges. And then we had tried to briefly discuss enabling conditions. And there also an example was given by Slovenia of that, yeah, due to the very severe floods, more amount of funding was available to flood protection. And that also gives them the opportunity to increase certain systems to deal with extensive flood. So that was a clear enabling condition. So that's a bit of a wrap up from breakout
so much,
room 1.
Karen. Thank you. From Chu.
Yes, I'm also going to share. We had a lot of people that were just listening in and could comment in the chat, but could not access the Miro. So maybe it's not so reflected in the Miro, but we did have some nice, some interesting insights. So the main thing we talked about is about basically water sharing, in the sense that we had now 2 examples where with like increasing climate change impacts. Of course, it's the same amount of people, the same amount of stakeholders that are in a way fighting between decreasing amount of available water, fresh water specifically. And then we had one example of like a nature wetland, and which is also a natural protected area, which then has to compete for water with an hydropower plant that of course also needs quite a lot of water. And then there specifically it was also presented how, of course, the in a way the power plant is a stronger stakeholder than maybe these natural areas, and how this plays out of then. Of course, the wetlands are supposed to have a lot of water, and in theory they're protected areas, so it should have priority. But then you have these maybe stronger, larger stakeholders with more power, which then can really, in a way, make it difficult to find some agreements. And then we also had later another region that's in a way similar problem of indeed multiple sectors having to share a limited and decreasing amount of fresh water. So this could also maybe be something to take into the next week of like, how do you deal when, like, how do you find agreements between different stakeholders when there's a limited amount of available fresh water resources and increasing. And of course, if anybody wants to share more, I know we got to this interesting point towards the end of the of the time that we had available. So if anybody from my group wants to add more about this, please feel free to do so.
Well, we're gonna leave the feedback open for those of you who are still filling it in. Let's just go to the Miro for the rest. So we're going to go to that part where it says, what topics would you like to explore further? And this is really just for us to know and to hear from you. What are the topics, challenges, special issues that you would like to get more deep dive more on? What kind of things do you want to talk about in future sessions related to water management? This is what we're asking of you. Do you have any ideas, any suggestions? This can be really broad, specific. So anything that you want to really discuss in the next sessions, let us know. You can either just go to Miro, or if you're not familiar with Miro, you can also share in the chat and we can put this in ourselves. But we ask you to just give us your ideas. Or you could also maybe just open the mic and share out loud if you feel like it. So.
I'm happy to open the mic and just ask, because I was taking notes from the 2 rooms discussion during plenary. And that was, I understood from what you shared, Valeria, that one topic that could be interesting is about how to deal with kind of with the sharing the water part. And this is not only like, for example, you mentioned about the wetland and the power plant, but I think that there could be different example coming up from different situations and regions. I'm not an expert, so I don't know exactly how to deal with this topic, but if someone think that it could be something that we can bring to the table, why not?
I see also in the chat drought problems and housing.
Okay. Yeah.
Mm.
Okay.
I
Yeah, and I
think,
would,
okay,
yeah,
I have someone suggest. I think hydromorphological degradation according the changing of hydrological regime. I think that is so important. And also according to the water framing directive, water status and water potential, and especially influence on the biological quality elements. I think that is important for my side.
Thank you
I
for
have problem
sharing.
with writing because I don't. It's not possible to take this post-it and then I talking to you. Do
That's
everybody
okay.
everybody heard me?
Yes, we heard
Okay.
you loud and clear.
Okay.
It was good. Thank you for sharing. And
Thank
if
you.
anyone has
Okay.
if anyone has the same problems, just please open your mics and share out loud, or type in the chat if you prefer. You can also be like the mirror is going to be open, so you can come back to it if you have any future ideas. We're going to be looking at this mirror board in the coming weeks. So if you suddenly
Okay.
have any other ideas throughout the next weeks, please come back to the mirror and share with us. We really would appreciate it. And I think, we can just move to the next. Yeah. So as you know, we're halfway on the week of the IPG week 1 of sessions. So if you haven't registered to the ones that you see on the screen now, we have 3 more days to go. Counting, like we have one in the afternoon today. So if you haven't, land use and food systems, that's happening in like 2 hours, I think. And then we have 2 more sessions tomorrow and 2 more sessions on Friday. So if you haven't registered to those yet, please do so by clicking on the links that you see where it says on the mirror board, register here. You can directly click on that and it will take you to the link so that you can register for the sessions. So that's the first thing we want to mention. And moving to the next, Sylvia, to the other one. We have already started to prepare the week 2. So we don't have the times and the links yet, but these are the slots where the sessions are going to be available. So it would be great if you could just save the dates and the time and keep an eye on the webpage and on our LinkedIn and so on, so that when we post these sessions specifically, you can register as well. We will be following up on you after the session, sending the recording and so on. But yeah, please just keep an eye if you're interested to continue participating in these sessions. And the last part, we want to just
Paloma, can we ask one thing?
Yeah.
Just to disturb you, because I think it's also what we were wondering is if it's also interesting for regions to share that what they could talk about. So not only like the topics they want to talk about or hear more about, but
Yeah.
what they would find interesting. I mean, they are also experts, or they are as planners, or in what they're talking about. So that also came up in my breakout room with the natural park, for instance. So maybe it's just a bit of a different angle to your question, but
Yeah, so
No.
also I was so for example, like when we're talking about like I see a lot of questions about drought, for example, housing, sharing available water resources. So if any of the regions that are present today or in the future actually have experiences with dealing with that, they are maybe happy with, or like something they would like to share, local case studies, please let us know and put it in the mirror or send us an email, doesn't matter, or put it in the chat here. Then that's also something we're really looking forward to, because we were hoping that the next IPGs, in the next IPGs, you could have also a larger role in presenting yourself.
Yeah, thank you both. That was gonna be my last point. So we have already created a survey so that you can already submit your case studies and presentations. So like Kariane and Valeria were saying, it's really interesting for us if you have anything to present, something that you can bring to the table, whether that's a case study or any expertise that you could turn into a presentation that would be insightful for the rest of us here. Then please go to the link that you see on the top of that image in mirror, but it's also in the chat. I just put it in the chat, and submit your whatever case study or presentation that you would like to propose. You have to do this one per each of the things that you would like to present, but it's all explained in the survey. So we will be looking forward to having you presenting if you're interested. And I think that's all. The mirror board is going to remain open, so you can go back to the resources, the discussion, and the dates for the next week and so on. It was really great having you all joining us today, and we hope that you will join us for the future sessions.